Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be jumping into GPT, but this time we're going to be using the Actions tab here. As you see, we have three different options when it comes to authentication as none, API key, or OAuth. Today we're going to be learning how to do the none version. On top of that, I'm going to explain what authentication is in this context, what API is in this context, so you can start making more complex GPTs for this OpenAI API store that is coming. Now, one thing I want to point out real quick, and trust me, I don't always do this for all my videos, but we've been getting a lot of new viewers. So let me reintroduce myself. My name is Corbin. I'm a full stack AI engineer. The type of content I do on this channel is I give pragmatic ways to actually leverage AI, as a lot of content that I see in this space is very much surface level. Doesn't really show you actually how to use it. And that's kind of the point of why I'm here is I'm going to show you real value, real ways to start applying AI in your personal or business life. So today's video, if I can speak, is going to be authentication type, and it's going to be for none. I plan on making a playlist here, and I've probably already made it, where we're going to be jumping into another video that's going to go over the API key and another video that's going to go over OAuth. And the reason I'm splitting it up is because of the fact that each one has their own complex ways of approaching. I'm going to explain the nuances for none, API key, and OAuth, and why you would choose it. And overall, I'll probably put a playlist up there that essentially is just going to be something about GPTs. We already did 2 other videos on this topic. One video showing you how to create in a private and a public context. But for today's video, we're going to show you how to leverage the authentication type of none. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump back over to our GPTs dashboard here. We're going to go ahead and create a new GPT here. If you see that Tom AI's business, we went ahead and showed you how to make GPTs based off trained data. So if you're interested in that video, you can check it out in the playlist here. But let's go ahead and see if I can click this real quick. Okay, so we're jumped over to our builder here. We're going to go ahead and do 2 different use cases when it comes to calling upon API with no authentication. But let me go to explain what even this is and the process behind it. So the reason this exists is this allows us to access data outside of GPT. So as you see right now, if we weren't going to do any actions, we are limited to the ecosystem OpenAI has, which is going to be web browsing, DALL-E image generation, and code interpreter. These are, obviously have their own specific use cases, such as searching the internet for most recent data. DALL-E image, create some cool images, and code interpreter. This is for like a math context. This doesn't have to always to do with code. But for actions, this allows us to access software that's outside of GPTs and OpenAI's ecosystem. So, for example, writing an email in Gmail, maybe publishing a post on Instagram, doing something on Twitter. This is where it can get way more complex. And as you know, we can provide more value if you plan on adding this to the GPT App Store, or alternatively, if you want to have more abilities and capabilities within your own private GPT. So knowing this, knowing how to leverage actions is actually pretty important. So let's go ahead and begin here. First thing we want to do is we want to hit add actions here. And let me go ahead and explain a little bit of what's occurring here. So first thing we need to understand is that your schema is going to be the code we provide in order for it to access the underlying API. So for us to get a nice little example here, I can go to untitled here. And this is kind of like the structuring OpenAI request here. Don't worry if it looks confusing. We're going to figure it out together. But this is kind of how the structuring works together when dealing with the type of calls that incur within your app. So knowing this, GPT. Knowing this, I'm going to go ahead and just fill in a real quick privacy policy from our website. This would probably be correlated to whatever the API you're using or the underlying, if you run a business, you would want to put your privacy policy here as well. So for now, I'm just going to put our business website here. So what we need to understand about this is a couple things. Because of the fact that, as you see, they have identified OpenAI here. Do I have to move? Let me see if I put myself right here. I do not want to cover stuff. Okay. So as you see here, we got OpenAI right here with the version, and then we get the version over here for the underlying info of the API you're trying to access. First off, this is important to know because I am not too sure within their documentation whether they'll automatically update this. But if OpenAI does incur a future update, you would need to come in here and manually update this. Second thing you need to understand is the URLs. If you're familiar with webhooks and how they work, essentially, this is where we're going to put in our webhook URL. So before we even jump into that, let me go ahead and just explain what a webhook is so we can kind of start on a ground level. Okay, so right now I got it generating out, so we just have like a nice little thing to look at while I talk about it. But essentially, webhooks have very specific examples in the context of passing software, and you gotta love it when GPT freezes. But one of the first contexts that we can do with a webhook, think of webhooks like passing the ball around, but each person you pass the ball around is a different software. So maybe I'm in ChatGPT right now, but I'm passing the ball to Instagram, the Instagram person, or I'm in GPT right now and I'm passing the ball to Google Drive. So this is how you want to think of webhooks. Let me go ahead and regenerate this so we're not just kind of blank here. But there is ways in which we can pass this data around, which I'll explain if this wants to load. All right, so as you see here, the webhook has a lot of capabilities, but the ones that we really have to care about in most contexts is going to be either post, get, or delete. This is how I want you to think of them. Post is I'm passing data, I'm passing the ball. Get is I'm receiving the ball, I'm receiving data from Instagram, I'm receiving data from Twitter. And then finally, delete is deleting data either within internally or deleting it outside to another software. So now that we kind of get a general idea of how softwares communicate with each other, that is where this comes into play. So on top of the fact that we're passing data around through these URLs, which we'll do today, understand the reason that authentication exists. So the reason authentication exists is because in some contexts, in order for me to receive or pass that data, it requires no type of authority or no type of password. There's no key. It's like think of it like a public space. I go to a public park. I don't need to pay anyone. Now, in the context of an API key, this is where it gets a little bit more gatekeeped, and same with OAuth. So the way I want to think of an API key is that in order to access that data or in order to receive that data, you'll need to create some type of key or some type of, way of proving that you essentially have access or the rights to that data. So what do I mean by that? Yeah, in the context of an API key, this would be like if I wanted to receive data from Google Maps, I would need an API key. Now, just to take a couple steps back, don't worry. We're going to go in depth in all of this, so make sure you subscribe here and you check out that playlist as I'm going to show you how to do that. But in today's video, we don't have to worry about API key. We don't have to worry about OAuth today. We're just going to worry about none. And this is going to give you a good perspective on what this even means and how we can leverage it in the context of a GPT. Okay, so I went ahead and got an API that requires no access token and it generates random quotes. But instead of me just pasting the code there and then proceeding from there, I'm going to actually show you how to use GPT so you can educate yourself. And therefore, when you try to approach this for whatever context you may be approaching it, you're not just stuck on a dead end here and trying to, copy and paste. So let me go ahead and show you how to do this. We're going to take this schema here. We're going to go to Command A, Command C this. And we're going to go ahead and start proctoring GPT a little here. We're going to say we are building a GPT that allows us to pass data with webhooks. Here is our example structuring we need to abide by. I'm gonna do semicolon. We'll paste that structuring. Please let me know if you understand. I will now be providing the URL, which in this context requires no authentication. So the reason I'm identifying that is that's very important. You need to identify whether it requires authentication or not because the processes for either one is drastically different. For now though, I know that this URL I'm about to provide here, not that one, let me go and grab it real quick, does not require authentication. So there is some use cases here where this is pretty powerful, as when you access some URLs that do require authentication, there may be some type of usage cost associated with it. Not with all of them, but some. For this is completely free. So here we go. Thank you for sharing the structure of your OpenAI specification. It is clear you're aiming to create an API. Okay, perfect. Okay, we want to do an action where when we call upon this schema, we receive a random quote. I'm going to go ahead and just provide the schema again, and let's see what it comes up with. So as you see here, this is the power of underlying ChatGPT here. So this is a lot of code I could have hard coded myself and typed out, but I don't feel like it today. So we're going to go ahead and let ChatGPT do this. Plus, this is going to really help you out. If you're not familiar at all with coding, this is going to be extremely important, as what it's doing here is it's giving me an overall structure of how to approach this. And as you see here, it's obviously not using the correct one right here. But what we're going to do here is we're going to make sure that it uses the correct one here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to read the documentation here and make sure that we are being very specific on the way we're approaching this code. Okay, so as you see here, I went ahead and made sure to ask it to make it specific to this API call here. So you might be asking yourself right off the bat, okay, what is that link? Typically, with any type of documentation when it comes to API, they'll have a master link like this. So for this, it's just very simply, presented like this. And then from here, though, what we can do is see it was coming out this generation again, but it was wrong again. The reason it was wrong is because it was giving me yourdomain.com. I made it very clear that actually we want to make sure that we're pointing to this one. And then as you see here, we got the entire output right here. Let's go ahead and copy this, bring it over to our GPT and see what it can do. So I'm gonna go ahead and paste it in here, see if there's any errors. Okay, so far so good, no errors. As you see here, the action is called get random quote. On top of that, I want to point out the underlying available actions. Notice how it says it's plural. What this means is that we're able to set up GPTs that can do multiple actions within an API context of receiving data. So that's cool to know. In this video, we're just going to do, our one action here of get random quote. But in theory, we could have multiple actions here. Notice how I said earlier, all the different functions of a webhook, such as post, get, delete. We have our first method here, which is get. So what do we do in this context? We're receiving data. So this specific context, we're receiving a random quote. Knowing this, we got our privacy policy here. Authentication can stay at none. And I'm going to go ahead and just start off by doing only me here. Can't confirm yet because I actually need to configure a little bit. So let's come over to GPT Builder here. We're going to say the purpose, and I'm going to go ahead and move myself. Woo! All right, the purpose of this GPT, and actually I forgot one thing, y'all. Make sure when you do this, you go and come over here and you copy the available actions. This is how we're going to reference it in the front end. Okay, so the purpose of this GPT is to give us a random quote. Use this action to do so. And I'm going to go to paste the exact name of the action that we just created there. This is going to ensure that GPT knows to call upon that action. If you're familiar with this channel, we've done tutorials with Zapier and plugins, and you'll know that when we do Zapier automations in the context of ChatGPT, we have to call upon the specific action in order for it to work. Same thing applies here. So it's updating. It knows that basically its purpose is to give me a random quote. And on top of that, it's going to use that specific action we just created through an API with no auth. Knowing this, can we get a profile picture here? Can I get a profile picture? Let's see what it comes up with. All right, so we got a super dope profile picture here. We're gonna say, can we also name it quote maker? And enter here again. Let's get a name here, and then let's go ahead and save it, and we're gonna go ahead and test in the front end. So just to show to you and prove to you that this is not accessing the internet when it's giving my answer, I'm gonna go ahead and turn off web browsing here. That light can stay on. I'm gonna go ahead and publish this for only me. Sorry, y'all, you cannot get the quote. I'm gonna go ahead and just say, can I get a random quote? And then in theory, this should hit our action here. We should see it accessing the underlying API we just connected here. It does. So the way they structure this is that they're gonna have decline, always allow, allow. This is important for you to know. What this can do in the future, or it can do now, but it just requires a little bit more complex work, is in theory, I can set up a payment processor here. I could set up some really complex flows that basically require you to say allow, and then we can kind of proceed from there. But it's always cool that you can always do always allow, so it doesn't keep reproctoring. I'm going to say allow here. Then as you see, we are talking to that underlying API here, and let's see our response. We did get an error, so let me go ahead and check and make sure I did it correctly. Okay, y'all, this is super important, and it's actually really good I caught this live. We actually do need to enable web browsing, not because we're searching the internet for the quote and whatever the output is. We're actually doing it so we can just send this to the internet as a webhook. Like, that's crazy. Honestly, it makes a lot of sense. I'm glad I caught it live here because there's probably a ton of people that are trying to develop GPTs and are getting super frustrated. That's important. Enable web browsing. So let's go ahead and see this on the live front end. I'm going to jump over there right now. I'm going to go ahead and confirm this again. And let's just go ahead and just see it live. Okay, so we're over in the front end here. Can I get a random quote? Come on, baby. Show me the money. Let's go. This should work here. All right, we're going to hit allow here, and we should get our quote here. Granted, this is a very simple use case, I know, but this is just giving you an idea of how this is going to communicate. Also, take note, it's right now making it so it shows talking to API quotable.io. Therefore, any type of API you access in the context of GPTs, it will show you the exact root domain, which isn't a bad thing, but just for reference, understand that. Also, one other thing I want you to know is that if I click this, it shows what the potential request body is. That's important to know. Last thing here is that, we got a nice quote here. He who is taught to live upon little owes more to his father's wisdom than he who has a great deal left him does to his father's care. I cannot speak. Okay. One other thing I want to show you if you're debugging and you're running into issues. Try this. Can you show me the JSON payload for this action? In theory, I would say this. Can you show me the JSON payload for the error that happened. I'm not going to say here because there's no error, but that JSON payload, that is basically our way of saying if there's an error, what did it say in the code that was, what was bad that happened basically. Here, as you see, nothing bad happened. The JSON payload was correct and we got the relevant information. But in theory, if you do have an issue with your code or with your or the API not working, that is a good, quick little tip there where it will actually show you the payload. And then the payloads typically are correlated with errors, such as bad request, 401, 501. If you don't know what those mean, you can just ask ChatGPT to help you further. Also, let me know in the comments down below if there's something very specific you want to talk to me or want me to tell you about when it comes to API and these kind of functions, as I know this is a little complex, but I mean, we can do a lot of cool stuff with it. So I was going to do another example of this, but due to the fact that no auth is not that nuanced in this context, I kind of wanted to leave it here. But what I will tell you though, understand, I'll point this out real quick too. Let me just move over here. If you don't want, supposedly, OpenAI claims that if you don't want your data to be used in their training, you can go ahead and uncheck this box right here. So that's really nice to know. But this kind of goes over no auth. This is how no auth works. If you want more tutorials on this topic, make sure to subscribe here. Check out that playlist. I know basically we're the only channel doing this right now, and I'm getting a ton of momentum from this content. A ton of people want this. I've read the comments. I see that we also want a video on Zapier's new AI task. So I'm going to do a video on that. I'm going to show you how to integrate that. Also, we're going to be jumping into for the authentication versions. So the API key and the OAuth. I'll probably make them a little bit longer. The reason I made this one kind of short and brief is I kind of wanted to give people just an idea of what even is authentication, what even is custom action like this. On top of that, it's very limited. In the context of releasing a public app here, I don't really see the no-auth API being that very fundamental, providing value. I mean, in theory, we could have done a quote maker with just ChatGPT itself, right? But that just kind of showed you the code. Knowing that, the API keys and the OAuth is going to be a pretty big tutorial here, so make sure you stay tuned for that. If you like what you saw in today's video, make sure to leave a like for the value you got. And yeah, without further ado, I'll see you in the next video.
Thanks for tuning in. And yes, surprise, I'm an AI avatar. Make sure to explore more here at Corbin AI, where we demystify AI for your personal and business life. Until next time.